Have you ever wondered why you view relationships differently than your friends or family members? Think of this situation. You're hanging out with your best friend and he or she tells you, "Oh my gosh, I just started seeing this new person and we've spent the last 16 days with each other." How would you react? Depending on your reaction, it could say a lot to your attachment style. So, let's dive into it. Hi, my name is Jessica and I'm currently a psychology student at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Right now, I'm taking a class on the psychology of emotions, and one of our chapters this semester discusses the emotions in relationships. And one of the main focuses of this chapter is attachment theory. This theory held my attention for the whole chapter and subsequently the rest of the semester. Relationships, whether they be romantic, platonic, or familial, they are always a part of our lives, which is what makes attachment theory so relevant. So you're probably wondering, what is attachment style? To put it simply, attachment style refers to the way in which an individual relates to other people. Attachment theory was proposed by John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth in the 50s and the 60s. They explained that certain attachment styles form in infancy, around 6 months. Basically, the ways in which your caregiver gave care to you in infancy determined your attachment style when you grew up. In order to effectively describe attachment styles, it's worth bringing to light the very famous study that these researchers pioneered. This study is called the strange situation. So, here's what went down in the strange situation. 1. An infant and their respective parent would enter a very unfamiliar, toy-filled room, and this would give the infant time to roam around and play. 2. After a few minutes of playing and just, getting familiar with the room, a stranger would enter and start to interact with the caregiver. 3. The parent leaves and is gone for 3 minutes while the infant is alone in the room with the stranger. After 3 minutes, the parent will return. 4. Both the stranger and the parent leave the room, leaving the infant alone. 5. Only the stranger returns in this time and tries to comfort or play with the infant. And finally, 6. The parent returns. Seems like a simple study, right? Well, depending on how the child reacts when the parent leaves, as well as how well the child reacts when the stranger is alone in the room with them, we can place them into 4 predetermined attachment styles. And the attachment styles for infancy include 1. Secure attachment. In the experiment, we know that a child has formed secure attachment when the child visually checks in with the parent. Also, we know a child has formed secure attachment when the child cries when the parent isn't in the room. However, the infant is easily soothed when the parent returns and continues playing after a while. 2. Anxious ambivalent attachment, or just simply anxious attachment. In the study, we know a child has formed anxious ambivalent attachment when the child becomes extremely panicked and starts to cry when the parent leaves. And when the parent comes back, it's really difficult for the child to be soothed. 3. Avoidant attachment. These infants in the study displayed little interest in the comings and goings of the stranger and the parent. 4. Disorganized attachment. This is a fairly rare form of attachment. Not many children get classified in this attachment. But basically, these infants tend to show extreme anxiety when the parent is there and isn't there. Now that we've gone over the different attachment styles, let's discuss how they're formed. In other words, what causes infants to form a certain attachment style? As I mentioned before, attachment styles form in infancy and are dependent upon how the caregiver cares for their child. So, secure attachment is formed when the caregiver is responsive to a baby's signals. This means that the caregiver lets the baby explore when the baby wants to explore, and this allows for independence to grow. And these caregivers are quick to respond if a baby wants attention or they're distressed. The caregiver will give them that attention as quickly as possible. As these children grow older, they are more likely to be more in touch with their feelings, be more competent, and have more successful friendships and relationships. Anxiously attached infants have caregivers that are too smothering, or as I like to call them, hoverers. These caregivers ignore the need for independence and instead opt to be very close to the infant at all times. As children, they tend to be very dependent on their caregivers and usually hope for their distresses to be solved for them. They also tend to be needy, angry, and distrustful. Avoidantly attached children have caregivers that are on the complete opposite of the spectrum. These caregivers are distant and unresponsive to any of the child's needs for attention, care, things like that. In childhood, these children tend to be extremely independent, and they tend not to rely on anyone but themselves. They usually shut down their own feelings in order to maintain self-reliance. Lastly, disorganized attached infants have caregivers that are suffering from depression or is dealing with some other type of trauma. In addition to that, these caregivers might also be abusive. As children, they tend to be extremely aggressive and self-reliant and often refuse the care from their caregiver. Interestingly, This attachment is called disorganized for a reason, and it's because that's exactly how their behavior is displayed sometimes. In certain situations, these children may reject their caregiver, but in others, they may come running to their caregiver for any distress. I know that I just shoved a lot of information in your brains, but it's important to note that the attachment styles that I just described are for infants only. There's a complete different way to measure attachment styles for adults, which I'll be discussing shortly. But the point of me explaining infancy attachment styles is so you could see how your attachment style as a child might have lasting effects on how you view relationships as an adult. So now I want you to take a moment and reflect. What attachment style do you think that you formed in childhood? So now I'm going to flash a series of descriptions on the screen, and I want you to pause and read them. Think to yourself which description matches you best. The descriptions that I just flashed on the screen was actually a part of a study that was conducted in 1987 by Cindy Hazan and Phil Shaver. They posted these paragraphs in the local newspaper and asked people to fill it out and mail them back their results. What were they, you asked? You guessed it, attachment styles. These are different adult attachment styles regarding how you view relationships, particularly romantic relationships. If you identify with the first one, it's likely that you have secure attachment. Securely attached individuals usually have the longest lasting relationships. They're least likely to be divorced. They describe love as being happy, friendly, and trusting. And they believe that ups and downs in relationships are completely normal. If you identified with the second paragraph, it's likely that you're avoidantly attached. These people report having a fear of being close to others and an inability to accept imperfections. They are also most likely to agree that romantic love does not last forever. And also, these individuals are most likely to describe themselves as independent. Now, if the final paragraph resonated with you, it's most likely that you're anxiously attached. Anxiously attached individuals are obsessively preoccupied with their partners. They experience intense highs and lows, and they're most likely to report a love at first sight feeling of their relationship. In addition to all of that, they also report feeling misunderstood, underappreciated, and self-doubting. Now you may be asking yourself, but Jess, what if I agreed to things in different paragraphs? What if I don't fit into one category? Boy, do I have an answer for you. As you can see, adult attachment is not so clean-cut as infant attachment. As adults, we're able to articulate how we feel, and more often than not, we're not going to fit so nicely into one category of attachment. So, Kim Bartholomew developed a new way to measure adult attachment. Her model measures two different things. One is how we view ourselves, in other words, our self-worth and our desirability as a partner. The second thing it measures is how we view other people. So, do we view other people positively or negatively? You can look at these things as two dimensions. The first dimension is the anxiety dimension, which measures the first part, or our self-worth. The second dimension is the avoidance dimension, which measures the second part, which is how we view other people. So let's take an example of her model. I know, this looks like a huge mess when you first look at it, but I can guarantee you it's not as bad as it looks. I won't go too into detail about this, but I will give you a few examples just so you can grasp the basics of it. Let's say you're highly anxious and highly avoidant, meaning you probably don't have a lot of self-esteem or you don't see yourself as a desirable partner, and you generally view people as less trustworthy. Then you would be placed into the fearful avoidant quadrant. On the flip side, let's say you have low anxiety and low avoidance. Then you'd be placed in the secure quadrant. Alright, so now you may be thinking, okay, but how does this apply to me? How is this relevant to my life? Well, I'm going to tell you. So let's revisit that situation that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. You and your best friend are sitting on the couch, and they start to tell you, hey, I've been seeing this new person, and we spent the last 16 days together. After some probing, you find out that they have literally not left each other's presence in the last 16 days. They're practically living together. How would you react? Would you be excited for them? Would you be ecstatic for them? Or would you be confused and perhaps tell them that it's not too wise to spend so much time with someone that they just met? Based off of all the research that we've gone through thus far in the video, if you and your friend were both very excited about that, it might be that you too have anxious attachment. Now, if you were to have another reaction, it might be that you were classified under either secure or avoidant attachment. Now that we've covered attachment styles and what they are, and possibly even identified what your own attachment style is, let's go over what the research has to say about each attachment style and how they generally conduct their lives. Have you ever wondered why some people prefer to talk on the phone, whereas other people prefer to text? Or why some people communicate solely through social media apps? Well, in a study done by Mori et al. In 2013, they found that avoidantly attached individuals tend to actually use email more than text messaging or phone calls. This could mean that avoidantly attached people tend to view emailing as a less intimate way of communication. And as we've come to learn, avoidantly attached individuals tend to shy away from intimacy. So it makes sense why they prefer to use email over, a text or a phone call. Mori also found that anxiety attachment was correlated with higher social media usage, as well as more public declarations of love. These public declarations of love made them feel more secure, more supported in their relationships. And finally, Mori found that securely attached individuals reported higher frequency of communication, but the method through which that communication was taking place wasn't specified. Did you know that there's sex differences between the attachment styles? Well, there are. According to Del Gudice, females tend to score higher in anxiety attachment, whereas males tend to score higher in avoidance attachment. And to further drive home his point, Del Gudice also did a cross-cultural study which examined the differences between the Europeans and the Middle Easterns. The results of his studies was much the same. Females tended to be more anxiously attached, and males tended to be more avoidantly attached. Do you think this trends where you live? As I've mentioned before, the different attachment styles tend to hold different beliefs when it comes to relationships. This is proven true based off of the results in a study conducted by Monteolivia et al. In 2016. Monteolivia and her colleagues examined the beliefs of young people with different attachment styles. They asked their participants to rate a scenario with one of 8 consequences. 4 of them were positive consequences, and 4 of them were negative consequences. And the scenario in question went along the lines of, whenever possible, to take my partner with me everywhere for 20 days. A few of the positive consequences that these participants could have rated the scenario include, this could lead to more sharing of things, or this will lead to a more secure relationship. And a few of the negative consequences that these participants could have rated the scenario include, this will lead to me losing other relationships, or this will lead to a monotonous and boring relationship. For the sake of understanding these results, I'm going to put back on screen Kim Bartholomew's model of adult attachment. Monteolivia found that secure individuals perceived more benefits than costs, or more positive consequences than negative consequences, whereas dismissing individuals perceived more costs than benefits. Monteolivia also discovered that secure and preoccupied individuals rated more positive behavioral consequences that led to a greater intimacy or closeness than avoidant individuals. And according to the results of the study, securely attached individuals reported feeling comfortable with affectional closeness and tendency to trust when needed. Preoccupied people had a high desire for intimacy and closeness and largely disregarded the need for their independence. These individuals were also found to be excessively preoccupied and anxious about rejection or abandonment. Lastly, avoidant individuals obviously avoided intimacy and kept their distance in their interpersonal relationships. Avoidant individuals were reported to fiercely protect their independence. So far, I've been focusing on romantic relationships for the majority of this video. So now, let's discuss what attachment styles could say about your platonic friendships. In this study, Hines et al. Focused on the association between violence exposure and mental health outcomes and how friendship attachment could mediate these outcomes. These researchers found that friendship attachment works in about the same way that infant attachment and adult attachment works. For example, securely attached people are more likely to utilize peer support as a form of coping, and they're also less likely to show psychological stress. In the study, Hines found that exposure to violence in adolescents had a higher association with later reports for depressive symptoms and anxiety symptoms. However, they found that people who were securely attached to their friends found a faster decrease rate in their mental health outcomes than for people who are insecurely attached to their friends. To finish off this video, let's discuss what your attachment style could say about how you emotionally regulate yourself, as well as how you relate to others. In a study done by Henschel et al., they found that securely attached adults were more willing to rely on others for emotional support. They felt more comfortable with intimacy, and they also felt confident that they were valued by others. Secure individuals also tended to use more adaptive and positive forms of emotional regulation, which helped them take on the perspective of others. Anxiously attached individuals revealed higher levels of personal distress, and they were more likely to ruminate on negative situations. In addition to all of that, they were also more likely to use self-blame as well as catastrophization as a form of coping. And finally, it was found that avoidantly attached individuals reported lower levels of empathic concern for others as opposed to anxiously or securely attached people. Avoidant adults also tend to reject the assistance of others. They also tend to repress the conscious awareness of attached feelings. Now you know that the theory of attachment is just one giant umbrella that holds many mini subtopics beneath it. Research on attachment styles are continuously being conducted, and there's going to be so much more information for you to find out if you choose to do so. I hope you found this video informative as well as entertaining. I also hope that you got to learn a little bit more about yourself. Thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and I hope you guys have a fantastic day.